Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. High-level talks to free the Israeli hostages in Gaza are underway as the United Nations urges countries to reverse a funding pause for their Palestinian agency. Meanwhile, thousands flee to Rafah in southern Gaza as shelling continues around the city of Khan Yunis. Our other headlines: China and Thailand sign a landmark visa deal to boost tourism between the two nations. And cultural exchange. French and Chinese artists collaborate on an operatic masterpiece to celebrate 60 years of diplomatic ties between their countries. The head of the US Central Intelligence Agency is holding high-level talks in France on a possible deal to pause the fighting in Gaza. Bill Burns is meeting officials from Qatar, Egypt and Israel, hoping to secure an agreement which will allow the release of hostages. Meanwhile, the United Nations has urged countries to resume funding for its Palestinian agency following allegations some staff members were involved in the Hamas attacks on Israel. Associated Press correspondent John Gambrell has the latest from Jerusalem.
Talks represent a real push by the Americans to try to get some sort of ceasefire deal on the table. Right now, as you mentioned, the CIA director is expected to meet with his counterparts from Israel and Egypt, as well as Qatar's prime minister. All this comes as this real push is going on to try to cease the fighting in the Gaza Strip. Now, U.S. officials who've spoken to the Associated Press describe one potential deal that's on the table. Again, I have to stress that this is just one potential deal. There's nothing formal yet. But this one proposal would see a phased ceasefire. In the first month of this ceasefire, there would be a release of hostages who were either elderly or infirmed or wounded from the October 7th attack. They would be released in exchange for a number of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails. In the second month, the hostages remaining in Gaza, which would be male civilians as well as any soldiers, would be released in exchange for a further release of Palestinian prisoners, as well as more aid on both of those months going into the Gaza Strip. Again, this is all pretty vague right now. There's no real number set for the number of Palestinian prisoners that would be released, but this is all coming as there's really been a concerted international effort to stop the fighting in the Gaza Strip. We've seen one ceasefire so far in this war that saw some 100 hostages released in exchange for Palestinian prisoners being released, but that lasted only for a week in November and then broke down and the fighting resumed. Now the Israelis have a real tight grip on the southern part of the Gaza Strip, and there's worries about those civilians that are trapped there in inclement weather, this winter rain that we've seen. So there is a desire to try to get this ceasefire going. However, we've heard both hardline statements from both Hamas and the hardline government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So any ceasefire is not guaranteed at this moment, Paul.
OK, and John, there's also a crisis over the United Nations aid because of claims that some of its staff in UNRWA, the Palestinian agency, were involved in the Hamas attacks in October in Israel. What have we heard on that today?
That's right. So we've heard just in the last few hours that France is going to join over 10 other nations, including the United States, that have paused their funding for this UN agency. This UN agency, known by the acronym UNRWA, has been really crucial since the formation of Israel in 1948 to provide services and aid to Palestinian refugees. Now, it's decades later. They're still in operation. They provide doctors, nurses, medical aid, food aid, as well as school teachers to help Palestinians here in Palestinian territories, as well in other countries where there are Palestinian refugee camps even to this day. Now, these allegations, I have to stress, have not been made public. The evidence has not been made public, but what we do know is that Israel had presented these allegations and evidence to the United Nations. They said that they took action. The U.S., which is the main backer of this UN agency, has said there were 12 people named in this allegation. We've also heard from the organization itself in the last few days. They say that they're doing an investigation. The UN as a whole is doing an investigation into these allegations. Again, nothing has been made public, but the fact that we've seen all these nations take action suggests that whatever allegations have been made are pretty grave. But again, this is a really crucial aid organization for the Palestinians, especially those civilians that are suffering right now in the Gaza Strip, caught in the middle of this war. We've heard from both the head of this agency as well as the UN Secretary General urging these countries that have stopped aid to restart aid, saying it's crucial for these civilians now caught in this war.
John Gambrell in Jerusalem. The Israeli military has reportedly issued an evacuation order in the Gazan city of Khan Yunis, where thousands have fled their homes amid intense shelling. Many are arriving in Rafah, close to the border with Egypt, from where our correspondent Akram Al-Satri sent us this update.
To start with, the situation in Khan Yunis is very dire. The bombardment is continuous in Khan Yunis area. More residential blocks are targeted, and the people who are fleeing from Khan Yunis area to the southern area of Rafah are being maltreated at the Israeli checkpoints that were erected and started in that particular area. People are providing an account of their experiences trying to flee from the ongoing carnage, as they describe, that is taking place in Khan Yunis. They were talking about people who were raising the white flags and are still being killed. They were talking about women who were holding their children are still being killed and leaving behind their children that were still alive and stained in the blood. They were talking about the blocks that were destroyed. They are talking about the ongoing warfare in the different parts of Khan Yunis that led to the death and homelessness of thousands of people of Gaza, and in Khan Yunis in particular, and in Rafah also, the city that has no appropriate infrastructure to accommodate the very large number of Palestinians, is still receiving more of the flow of the people who are fleeing from Khan Yunis, people who moved before from Gaza and the north and from other areas of the Gaza Strip. Now Rafah is overflowing with people, and more people are coming. More people are coming, carrying their hope to survive and carrying more fears that this warfare would be chasing them, would be destroying their life, and would be making them lose more their homes and displacing them once again. According to the Palestinian Minister of Health, 165 Palestinians were killed today and around 250 were injured. So it is an indication of the ongoing bombardment, ongoing war, and ongoing and continuous loss that the Palestinians are sustaining because of the ongoing ground activities in Gaza.
Yes, and we've seen reports that Israelis at the border crossings into Gaza have been trying to block aid deliveries into the Gaza Strip. What's the latest on the food and medical supplies that is so desperately needed there?
It's the fifth day now that Gaza has no humanitarian aid entering Gaza Strip. Kerem Shalom was obstructed. The access of the truckloads was obstructed apparently by the families of the captives Israelis. And the bottom line is that the Gazans are now not accessing the already depleting stock in the market in Gaza. Now, with Rafah being the main area of gathering for whole Palestinians, the suffering is exacerbated. The prices of the items in the market are already increasing many-folds because of that, and the suffering continues, and the bombardment is still continuous in some parts of Rafah. We heard some different news about bombardment in different areas of Rafah. So it's more of the suffering, it's more of the very lacking situation, it's more of the deprivation, not only from the safety, but also from the food that is needed to continue living.
That was Akram Al-Satri in Gaza. In other news, China and Thailand have agreed to visa-free travel for each other's nationals in a bid to boost tourism. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, Chinese visitors have been slow to return to Thailand, where they were once a major driver of the tourism industry. It's hoped that this landmark agreement will change that, as our correspondent Tusita Salkau reports from Bangkok.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Thailand's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs have co-signed an agreement to waive visa requirements for travellers between both countries starting March the 1st.
This will surely bring our people-to-people exchanges to a new height. There will be a big increase in the number of Chinese tourists visiting Thailand. We also welcome friends from Thailand to feel the vitality and vibrancy of China and the hospitality of the Chinese people. China and Thailand are as close as one family. And the two peoples should forge closer friendships and stronger bonds and embrace a better future.
Now, China and Thailand have decided to tear down these bureaucratic barriers, allowing their citizens a visa-free stay for up to 30 days on either side. It's a move poised to boost travel dynamics and economic opportunities for both countries.
Visa-free travel for both countries has never been done in the past, and it's a very significant decision that shows the strong relationship between both countries. As for the economy, it will create a more dynamic tourism sector, as people can travel freely. Thai people can also travel to China more conveniently, and it goes without saying that China and Thailand are family, because we can now travel with ease.
For Thailand, this signing comes at a pivotal time. A temporary visa exemption for Chinese travelers that was implemented in September last year is ending at the end of February. So this pact that was signed today will likely accelerate the recovery of Thailand's vital tourism industry. This is of huge importance because Chinese tourists were Thailand's largest group of visitors before the pandemic and are seen as key to a sustained recovery of the country's tourism sector. Now, last year, Chinese tourists formed the second largest group of visitors to Thailand, with around 3.4 million tourists. That number is still far from the 10 million Chinese tourists that the country welcomed in pre-pandemic 2019. But with this new visa-free agreement, Thailand's tourism industry is optimistic, with a target of 8.2 million Chinese tourists this year.
If there are no longer visa restrictions, tourism will increase. It will boost the economy and push people to travel. For us Thais, if we don't need visas to go to China and the process is easy, it makes us want to go there as well.
This visa-free travel pact between China and Thailand marks a significant milestone in international travel post-pandemic, promising a resurgence of the tourism industry and deeper cultural exchanges between the two nations. Lucita Saogao, CGTN, Bangkok, Thailand.
You are watching CGTN. Still ahead. Cultural ties. Artists from France and China take to the stage to celebrate 60 years of relations between the two countries.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos and unicorn companies. Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello there, welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. High-level talks to free the Israeli hostages in Gaza are underway as the United Nations urges countries to reverse a funding pause for their Palestinian agency. China and Thailand sign a landmark visa deal to boost tourism between the two nations. There have been large protests in Spain against the Prime Minister's controversial amnesty law for separatists. The policy would see exiled Catalan politicians allowed to return home, and many fear that would spark renewed calls for an independence referendum. It's also prompted the opposition to call for a rebellion against Pedro Sanchez's coalition government. Our correspondent, Ken Brown, reports from Madrid.
New Year, fresh protests. Public anger over the amnesty deal for Catalan separatist leaders that allowed Pedro Sanchez to retain power hasn't subsided. Tens of thousands took to the streets of Madrid waving Spanish and European flags to show their continuing rejection of Sanchez's regional strategy. The People's Party, or the PP, insists that this amnesty law is just another step towards giving Catalonia an official independence referendum. To complicate the situation further, this week declassified documents confirmed that Spain's intelligence services were spying on the president of the Catalan government, Per Aragonés, using the Pegasus spy software. The government needs the support of Catalan independence parties, and Spain's justice minister insists the government had no knowledge of such activity. Now the PP is convinced that Sanchez will offer a referendum to Catalonia in the wake of this scandal. Sanchez's PSOE Socialist Party and partners in coalition have repeatedly and vehemently denied that Catalonia will be given an independence referendum, saying that they work within the Spanish constitution, which does not allow it. Opposition leader Alberto Núñez Feijóo has called on over 3,300 PP mayors from across the country to join forces in a civic rebellion, which could take place before a potential referendum.
As citizens, we need to keep taking to the streets to show we don't agree, and our institutions have to try and mitigate the attack against democracy.
We have to fight this with everything we have. We need to say loudly that we don't want our democracy or equality to be broken.
A big week lies ahead for the government as the amnesty law goes to a vote before Spain's Congress amid the turbulence of the spying scandal. Meanwhile, the right continues to pile on the pressure. Ken Brown, CGTN, Madrid.
People who have worked to bring about Chinese-German friendship over the years have been honoured at a ceremony in Frankfurt. Those recognised for their efforts came from the worlds of business, culture, sport and everywhere in between. Also in attendance was CGTN correspondent Peter Oliver, who has this report.
Celebrating Chinese-German friendship with music and traditional Chinese dance. At the event hosted by the Chinese Consulate General Huang Yiyang, awards were given to 8 German people who've made a significant and sustained effort in bringing their country closer to China and the Chinese people. Karl-Heinz Gass has a 43-year association with China. A former butcher, he strived to build economic and artistic ties between the two countries. Some of his Chinese collection from his travels were donated to the consulate to display 5 years ago. His whole connection with China began because of a chance encounter with a Chinese official.
It was a coincidence in Switzerland. It started something because I ended up taking over 300 flights to Beijing, and I was there for at least 3 years. I went to China because when I came there, I got through to the people, and they had respect for me, and I told them the truth about everything.
Thomas Rabe is keeping alive well over a century of his family's relationship with China. His grandfather was John Rabe, who, as CEO of the Siemens company in China, was in Nanjing during the Japanese invasion during World War II. Using the large amount of documents from the time that still exist, including his grandfather's diaries, Thomas has written a book about John Rabe, whose leadership in the creation of the safety zone in Nanjing saved 250,000 Chinese civilian lives.
Looking at him, I admire him because he's an example for moral and leadership, for humanitarianism here, and what he did here for the Chinese people. He said, if you save one life, you can save the complete world, which is mentioned in the Talmud here. And my grandfather also said it here in other words, never leave a friend alone here if he is in danger.
Both China and Germany have a strong passion for sport, and in 1992, when Klaus Schlappner became the first foreigner to coach the Chinese men's football team, those two worlds came together. Schlappner led China to the semi-finals of the Asian Cup and changed a few crucial internal structures of the national side to bring them in line with other nations. But there were a few hurdles to overcome, not least how he communicated with the players.
Mit meiner Sprache, mit meinem Dialekt.
Yes, however, I have an excellent interpreter who was in Germany for 6 months at the Göttingen Institute and also in Heidelberg. And I come from this corner of Heidelberg, Mannheim, and they speak this dialect, and he understood it. Yes, but you don't have to understand as much with words as you do at the training ground. Then the players here saw whether I was in a good mood or not. And of course, I tried a lot to get the players to Beijing all the time, because it wasn't the case before. They were with their teams and they arrived the day before the international match.
Worthy winners, one and all, celebrating with a mighty feast and looking forward to many more years of Chinese-German friendship. Peter Oliver, CGTN, Frankfurt.
Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso have announced they will leave the Economic Community of West African States. In a joint statement, the military regimes of all three countries said the bloc had drifted from the ideals of its founding fathers. ECOWAS imposed tough sanctions on all three nations following each of their recent military takeovers. Unidentified gunmen have killed 9 Pakistani workers in an attack near the border with Iran. The two countries are trying to normalise diplomatic relations after a series of tit-for-tat missile strikes in recent weeks. Iran's foreign minister is due to visit Pakistan on Monday. Climate change protesters have thrown soup at the Mona Lisa in France. The 16th century artwork by Leonardo da Vinci is one of the world's most famous paintings and is held at the Louvre Museum in central Paris. The artwork sits behind bulletproof glass, so it's unlikely to have been damaged. A group called Food Counterattack has claimed responsibility for the stunt. Tennis, and Yannick Sinner has claimed the men's singles title at the Australian Open. The Italian lost the first 2 sets, but fought back to beat Daniil Medvedev in 5 thrilling sets and win his first Grand Slam. The 22-year-old is the youngest player to win the Australian Open since Novak Djokovic in 2008, who he'd knocked out in the semi-finals. As China and France celebrate 60 years of working together on the diplomatic stage, a new project has seen artists from both countries collaborate on the theatrical stage. They've reworked a classic in Beijing to mark the start of the China-France Year of Culture and Tourism. Our correspondent Wang Siwen went to take a look.
Romance and tragedy come together in this new adaptation. Artists from China and France recreating the opera masterpiece.
In 2018, fresh and modern version of the play Romeo and Juliet was presented at the National Center for Performing Arts. In 2024, the play is back on Chinese stage after half a decade.
Stefano Poda directed the opera in Beijing 6 years ago. He returns to oversee the direction, set and costume design, lighting and choreography. The renowned opera is presented in a new and unique way.
It will not be a repeat, but a new premiere. The structure remains the same. The body of the show is the same, but the soul of each person has changed a lot.
Poda says the National Center for the Performing Arts has given him freedom to recreate the classic.
It is the freedom of space, which offers a technology and a technical mechanism unique in the world. It's the freedom to experiment without having previous references. It is the freedom to create something, not just for one type of audience, not just for one theater, but something universal, for every spectator of every culture and every age.
2024 is being celebrated as a China-France Year of Culture and Tourism, marking the 60th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between the two countries. Poda says he has tried to create something that transcends culture and geographical boundaries.
I try to find a synthesis between cultures to show the universality of feelings and of Shakespeare. The decor can come from architectures from both the West and the East, and the costumes are a union of European and Chinese style. The center of the staging is the union of two complementary parts, two opposing spheres which complement each other, like yin and yang. Shakespeare would be happy with this conception. It is shown that the opposing tensions are appeased in a perfect union that combines contrast and conflicts.
Poeta describes theater as the world of dreams and opera as a dimension that allows us to travel far away from our lives. He hopes the return of Romeo and Juliet to the stage in Beijing will capture the imagination of local audiences. Wang Sun, CGTN, Beijing.
Innovation has always been crucial for small businesses to survive and thrive. For one couple in France who lost their jobs in the pandemic, using social media was key to the success of their new cookie store. Our Paris correspondent Ross Cullen went for a taste.
Chocolates, peanut butter, berries, the sweet taste of cookies is hard to resist. But for one couple, it wasn't always a taste they had in mind. During the coronavirus lockdown in 2020, they used social media to build a following as they began to build their baking business.
People were spending more time on TikTok, and it was my partner who had the idea to just start posting on TikTok for our cookies. And we saw a massive difference with the growing accounts of TikTok and Instagram. It was a lot more satisfying to watch a video of opening a cookie up, seeing what was inside, all the chocolate, eating it, whereas compared to just a regular picture.
The store has more than 46,000 followers on Instagram, but a community of more than 360,000 on TikTok, which has established itself as one of the world's biggest social networks. It has more than 150 million monthly active users across Europe, according to company data. The social network is expected to reach 17.5 million users in France alone by 2026. But the mass appeal of TikTok can have drawbacks.
It used to be a lot easier to grow. Now it's getting a little bit harder because everyone's using that platform. Same thing for Instagram. When they started their Reels, it was a lot easier to grow. Now it's slowly going down. But YouTube right now everyone is saying it's a big hit because of the shorts.
The growth of the cookie business online and in-store means Joseph and Josie are looking to expand their offering by franchising or allowing an independent trader to use the Jojo's Dough name in return for a licensing fee.
It was the only way to go faster, I will tell, because it's very difficult to have set up the shop or all around France, so it's going to be much easier and more money, I think, with franchising than open a couple of shops.
France has one of the world's most well-known cuisines, and bread, pastries and patisserie are a large part of that. This shop has shown that it is possible to cater to the French market, with creating a dynamic online presence just as important as creating a best-selling cookie. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
Looks pretty good, doesn't they? Well, finally, the world's largest cruise ship has set sail from the port of Miami. Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas runs nearly 365 metres from bow to stern. The ship includes 7 swimming pools, an ice skating rink, a theatre and more than 40 restaurants. It can carry around 10,000 passengers and crew. The ship is on a 7-day island-hopping voyage through the tropics, but there are concerns about the vessel's methane emissions. Our headlines again. High-level talks to free the Israeli hostages in Gaza are underway as the United Nations urges countries to reverse a funding pause for their Palestinian agency. Thousands flee to Rafah in southern Gaza as shelling continues around the city of Khan Yunis. And China and Thailand sign a landmark visa deal to boost tourism between the two nations. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or you can scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. There's more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's Razor. For now, though, from all the team in London, goodbye.